There are a number of passages in the New Testament in which certain persons are described as the brothers and sisters of Jesus. For example, on one occasion when he was teaching in the synagogue in his hometown Capernaum, many were astonished at his words and said,
"How did this wisdom and these miracles come to him? Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother called Mary, and his brothers James, Joseph, Simon and Judas? And his sisters, aren't they all with us?" And they took offense at him. And Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and in his own household."
Matthew 13:54-57. Note that Jesus' family was known to their fellow town residents, and he is said to have 4 named brothers and at least 2 unnamed sisters, who stood in some definite filial relationship to Joseph and Mary. In John 2:12 we are told that Jesus went to Capernaum,
together with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples.
Note that in this passage Jesus' brothers are distinguished from his disciples, who are also called his brothers in the New Testament in a spiritual sense. The Gospels represent the brothers of Jesus as habitually going about in company with Mary, and the passages cited above and others in the New Testament clearly imply that they all shared a common household with Mary, Joseph and Jesus. Jesus' brother named James was a prominent member of the early church and is referred to as, quote and unquote, the brother of the Lord in the Apostle Paul's letter to the Galatians 1:19. There are other references to Jesus' siblings in the New Testament. The issue of the exact identity of these brothers and sisters of Jesus is controverted now and has been so from the earliest centuries of the Roman Catholic Church. The following 3 views have historically existed and now exist with regard to their identity. 1. The brothers and sisters were other children born to Joseph and Mary after Jesus' birth, that is, they were his younger half-brothers and half-sisters. This view predominates in Protestantism. A 4th century resident of Rome named Helvidius famously defended this view, and it is therefore called the Helvidian theory. 2. They were the children of Joseph from a previous marriage. Presupposing the virginal conception of Jesus, they were his stepbrothers and stepsisters. This position is held by the Orthodox Church today. It is also the position of some Protestant scholars, past and present. The earliest written source reflecting this tradition is an apocryphal gospel named Proto-Evangelium of James, dated to the middle of the 2nd century AD. This spurious gospel represents Joseph as an old man when Mary is espoused to him, having sons but no daughters. About AD 375, Epiphanius, bishop of Constantia in Cyprus, presented this view in his work called Panarion, also known as Haresis. According to Epiphanius, Joseph was at least 80 years old when he married Mary. Joseph's 2 daughters were named Mary and Salome. 3. They were cousins of Jesus. The Roman Catholic scholar Jerome, who lived in the 4th to 5th centuries, propounded this view. In his tract titled Against Helvidius, dated to about AD 383, and written in an attempt to refute Helvidius' position, he expresses the view that they were the sons of the woman called Mary of Clopas, and Mary the mother of James and Joseph mentioned in the Gospels, and that she was Jesus' mother's sister. The cousin theory is the official position of the Catholic Church. There are also other theories such as that they were the children of the Clopas mentioned in John 19:25, after whose death the children were entrusted to Joseph, who, it is assumed, was Clopas' brother. That would make them the foster children of Joseph and foster siblings of Jesus. The official view of the Roman Catholic Church on Jesus' brothers and sisters is reflected in paragraph 500 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which reads,
The Church has always understood these passages as not referring to other children of the Virgin Mary. In fact, James and Joseph, brothers of Jesus, are the sons of another Mary, a disciple of Christ, whom St. Matthew significantly calls the other Mary. They are close relations of Jesus, according to an Old Testament expression.
By the word's Old Testament expression, the Catechism means that, when referring to the brothers and sisters of Jesus, the Greek New Testament uses the Greek words for brother and sister, adelphos and adelphe, respectively, in a wider sense to refer to cousins of Jesus in accordance with a Semitic idiom. In Classical Greek, these words always refer to a blood brother or sister in the context of physical relationships. More will be said on this later. The denial that the brothers and sisters of Jesus were his blood brothers is usually coupled with the doctrine of the perpetual virginity of Mary, which will be explained now. The New Testament explicitly teaches the virginal conception of Jesus, that is, he was conceived in the womb of his mother Mary by the Holy Spirit, Matthew 1:18-25 and Luke 1:26-38. The Holy Spirit in this context means the power of God, as the parallel phrase, power of the Most High, in Luke 1:35 shows. In the early Catholic Church there grew a belief that not only was Mary a virgin when she conceived Jesus, but that she maintained her virginity during and after his birth. During means that Mary's physical virginity, that is, the hymen, miraculously remained intact during the birth of Jesus. This belief, that Mary was a virgin before, during and after the birth of Jesus, became established as a dogma of the Catholic Church and is known as the dogma of the perpetual virginity of Mary. This is considered an infallible dogma of the Roman Catholic Church, that is, an article of faith which the magisterium of the Catholic Church declares as binding on every professing Catholic. In addition to the Roman Catholic Church, adherents to this doctrine include Eastern and Oriental Orthodox churches. Some early reformers such as Luther, Calvin and Zwingli subscribed to it. Though later Reformed teaching rejected this doctrine, some modern Anglican and Lutheran theologians support it. On the other hand, some modern Roman Catholic theologians favor the view that these brothers and sisters were his blood siblings. It should also be mentioned that not all those who deny that these brothers and sisters of Jesus were his blood siblings subscribe to the doctrine of perpetual virginity of Mary. The position advocated in this video series is that the evidence of the Bible best supports the view that those described as brothers and sisters of Jesus were indeed his blood brothers and sisters, that is, sons and daughters born to Joseph and Mary after his birth. What follows first presents my arguments for the view that those referred to as brothers and sisters of Jesus were indeed his blood siblings, with a consideration of the responses to them by apologists of the contrary view. This is followed by a consideration and refutation of the important positive arguments usually adduced in favor of the view that the brothers and sisters of Jesus were not his blood siblings. Jerome's cousin theory will receive the most attention as it is more inconsistent with the data of the Bible as compared with its main alternative, that is, they were Joseph's children from a previous marriage. Argument 1. The most natural way to understand the brothers and sisters of Jesus mentioned in the New Testament is as his blood siblings. Let's look at Matthew 13:54-57 again. Note that Jesus' brothers and sisters are associated with his father and mother, and the most natural interpretation is to take them as his own brothers and sisters, that is, as members of his immediate family. This immediate family is what Jesus calls, quote and unquote, his own household. This passage hints that even his own family did not give the honor that was due to him as a prophet of God, as John 7:5 confirms.
For not even his brothers were believing in him.
When Jesus said, "A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and in his own household," Matthew 13:57, he was not just quoting a proverb but describing his own experience. Jesus' family, that is, his father, mother, brothers and sisters, were known to the people of Nazareth. When they heard his preaching and his miracles, they were astonished, because they knew his family and background and could not believe that he was what he claimed to be. The people say that Jesus cannot be what he seems to be, since they know who he is, and they speak of his family to show that he is quite ordinary. They thought that, since he came from an ordinary village family, he had no right to make the claims that he did. In his article, "Did Mary Remain a Virgin?" William J. Bridcut writes that the local people were
amazed at the wisdom of Jesus and at his ability to perform mighty works, and they wondered how he came to have such power. Who would ever think that Mary's son could do such wonderful things? So the people of Nazareth speak of Jesus as coming from an ordinary family to put him in his place, and also as part of their expression of amazement. The carpenter and Mary and brothers and sisters are mentioned to put him down, and also because what they saw and heard was so different from what they would have expected. But if the brothers and sisters were merely cousins, a relationship which others could claim, then there would be no surprise at any difference. People express surprise only when they see blood brothers who are different from each other. There is no surprise at cousins being different.
Let's now look at another passage. Mark 3:31-35. Its parallels are found in Matthew 12:46-50 and Luke 8:19-21. Once when Jesus was preaching to a crowd, his mother and brothers came to see him, but they were not able to get near him because of the crowd. Someone told Jesus,
"Your mother and brothers are outside looking for you." "Who are my mother and my brothers?" he asked. Then he looked at those seated in a circle around him and said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother."
William J. Bridcut, who was cited earlier, has the following comment on this episode in Jesus' life.
In speaking like this, Jesus is saying that there are closer bonds than those of blood, and his words have force only if the spiritual relationship he speaks about is seen to be as close as the closest of family ties. Our Lord's words would fall flat if he said what could mean, "Whoever does God's will is my cousin." The words lose their wonderful meaning if the contrast is not with Mary and the brothers related by blood to each other and to Jesus on the one hand, and those who do God's will on the other.
The view that Jesus' brothers and sisters were Joseph's children from an earlier marriage is largely immune to the force of the above objection, since stepbrothers and sisters would form part of Jesus' nuclear family. Those who deny that these brothers and sisters are Mary's children and hold that they are cousins of Jesus usually explain their close association with Mary as reported in the Gospels in the following manner. After the death of Joseph, Mary became an inmate of the home of the woman called Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, in Matthew 27:56, who is called the other Mary in Matthew 28:1, and Mary, the mother of James the younger and of Joseph, in Mark 15:40. Joseph is a variant form of the name Joseph, and both names refer to the same person in these texts. On a certain interpretation of John 19:25, this Mary is understood to be the sister of Jesus' mother, also named Mary. Because of the improbability of two sisters of the same family bearing the same name Mary, some try to explain away the difficulty by assuming that this other Mary was a near relation of Jesus' mother. We shall return to the interpretation of John 19:25 later. As mentioned earlier, the Greek words adelphos and adelphe in classical Greek always refer to a blood brother or blood sister, respectively, when used of biological relationships. Those who hold that the brothers and sisters of Jesus were his cousins claim that a Semitic idiom underlies the use of adelphos and adelphe in relation to them. Hebrew, in which most of the Old Testament was written, and Aramaic, which was the mother tongue of the Jews in Jesus' day, belonged to the Semitic family of languages. These two languages had no separate word for cousin, and the words used for a blood brother and a blood sister could also be used to describe kinship in a wider sense. So, for example, in Genesis 13:8, Abraham calls Lot brother, using the Hebrew word ach, though the latter was actually his nephew. In the Septuagint, the Old Greek translation of the Old Testament, which was used by the first-century Christians, this Hebrew word in this Genesis passage is translated by adelphos. This usage of adelphos, and the similar usage of adelphe in the Septuagint translation of the Old Testament, is appealed to by those who hold that Jesus' brothers and sisters were his cousins in support of their position. It is argued that the New Testament documents use adelphos and adelphe in the sense of cousin in a manner analogous to the Septuagint. But the analogy between the New Testament and the Septuagint in this case is questionable because the two collections of writings are so different in origin. With the Septuagint, we are dealing with what may be called translation Greek, a type of Greek that sometimes translates Hebrew texts with wooden literalism. Hence it is not a matter for surprise that at times adelphos would be used to render the common Hebrew word for brothers and relatives, even when a blood brother is not meant in the original. But with the New Testament writers, whatever Aramaic sources they had available to them, they would not have felt they were dealing with a fixed sacred text as the Old Testament that had to be translated word for word. As the New Testament was written originally in Greek, there is the natural presumption that the word adelphos and adelphe, when used in the New Testament in reference to biological kinship, would refer to a blood brother and a blood sister as in classical Greek. Indeed, elsewhere in the Greek New Testament, when adelphos and adelphe are used of people closely related biologically, they always refer to a blood brother or blood sister. For example, John is called the adelphos of James, the son of Zebedee, in Matthew 4:21. Andrew is called the adelphos of Simon Peter, in verse 18. In John 11:1, Martha is called Mary's adelphe. When we read such passages, does it ever cross our minds that the one called brother or sister was not a blood brother or sister but might actually have been a cousin, or a person living in the same family, but with no blood bond to the other person named in the text? Similarly, is there anything in the context of John 2:12 to make us think that, while his mother was Jesus' own mother, his brothers were not his own brothers? The Greek language had words for a cousin, anepsios, and more general terms for relations, and these are used in the Greek New Testament. When describing Mark as Barnabas' cousin, the Apostle Paul uses anepsios in Colossians 4:10, but he refers to James as the Lord's brother in Galatians 1:19, using the Greek word adelphos. In 1 Corinthians 9:5, Paul uses the plural form of adelphos in referring to the brothers of the Lord. If these had been Jesus' cousins, Paul could have used the word anepsios, but he didn't. In the following passages, Luke uses the Greek word adelphos to refer to brothers and the Greek word syngenes to refer to relatives. In Luke 14:12, Jesus says to the host who had invited him to a meal,
"When you give a lunch or a dinner, don't invite your friends, your brothers, your relatives, or your rich neighbors."
In Luke 21:16, Jesus says to his disciples that the time will come when they
will be delivered even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends.
Note that brothers in both passages are distinguished from relatives. Note also the sequence parents, brothers, relatives in the last passage. While some Aramaic sources may underlie the Gospels, and, stylistically, the New Testament writers, especially in the Gospels, do display their familiarity with the Septuagint, the ancient Greek translation of the Old Testament, the fact remains that the Greek words adelphos and adelphe refer to a blood brother and a blood sister in classical Greek in the context of biological relationships. And whether these words bear the broader sense of kinsman or relative in the New Testament when used in reference to the brothers and sisters of Jesus, has to be determined not by merely suspecting or assuming a Semitic background for them, but by examining how the New Testament writers used these words in context. And the contexts and the manner in which Jesus' brothers and sisters are mentioned point to their being his blood siblings. It should also be pointed out that, while it is true that Biblical Hebrew and Aramaic make no distinction as between a blood brother and a close relation such as a cousin, it doesn't mean that the ancient users of these languages did not indicate such distinctions in speech and writing in other ways when using their words for brother and sister. Owing to their ambiguity, the precise relationship denoted by these words is regularly specified in the Old Testament by circumlocution. In 1 Chronicles 23:22, the daughters of Eleazar are said to have married the sons of Kish, who are described as their brothers, but we know that they are actually their cousins, because in verse 21 Eleazar and Kish are said to be sons of the same father. In Judges 8:19, my brothers are more specifically defined as the sons of my mother. In Deuteronomy 13:6 and Psalm 50:20, the phrase "your brother" is more specifically described as "your mother's son." Sometimes the preceding context helps to identify the precise relationship meant. For example, in Genesis chapter 14, verses 14 and 16, Lot is called Abraham's brother, but from Genesis 11:27 the reader already knows that the relationship is uncle-nephew. Similarly, the mention of brothers and sisters of Rahab in Joshua chapter 2, verses 13 and 18, and 6:23, in close association with her father and mother, serves to identify them as her own blood brothers and sisters. The New Testament writers wrote in Greek, and, when using words for brother and sister, they did not need to specify the precise relationship involved, as the default meanings of these words in the context of biological relationships took care of that. It should be emphasized that the very reason why we know that adelphos and adelphe as used in the Septuagint can mean not only a blood brother or blood sister, but also a cousin, nephew or some other relative, is that the immediate context makes it clear by some circumlocution. In the New Testament, just the bare words adelphos and adelphe are used in reference to Jesus' brothers and sisters. Therefore, in the absence of anything to the contrary in the immediate or wider context, sound exegesis requires that we take these words in their default senses of blood brother and blood sister in the context of close biological relationships. There is also independent extra-biblical support for the view that the brothers and sisters of Jesus were his blood siblings. Flavius Josephus was a Jewish priest, scholar, and historian who was born of an aristocratic priestly family in Jerusalem and lived in the 1st century. He wrote valuable works on the Jewish revolt of AD 66 to 70 and on earlier Jewish history. In his book The Antiquities of the Jews, Book 20, verse 200, he refers to a brother of Jesus, whose name was James, using the same word adelphos. In all his works, Josephus uses the Greek word for cousin, anepsios 12 times, showing that he knew the distinction between adelphos and anepsios. He even corrects the Hebrew usage in the Old Testament in favor of Greek precision on this point. An example of this can be found in Book 1 of the Antiquities of the Jews, where Jacob tells Rachel, the daughter of his mother's brother Laban, that they are cousins. The original Hebrew Old Testament text has Laban saying to Rachel that he was her father's brother, using the Hebrew word ach. Specifically, he was Laban's nephew, Genesis 29:12. The Septuagint renders it with adelphos.